Hey there, my name is Megan and welcome to my channel, or welcome back. Today I'm going to be doing the 3 bookish things tag. So there are prompts, and for each prompt you have to give 3 responses. So I will definitely put the link to the book blog where I got this tag, as well as the prompts below if you guys want to answer them in the comments. But before we go ahead and get on into the tag, if you're not already subscribed to my channel, please consider hitting that subscribe button, as well as the little bell icon so you can be notified every time I post new content. I post new videos every Monday, Thursday, and Saturday. Also, don't forget to give this video a like to throw a little bit of support my way. The first prompt are 3 authors that you read once and you loved them and you will continue to read them. And mine are actually all fantasy authors. The first one is beloved Brandon Sanderson. So I picked up Mistborn probably like 10 or 12 years ago. I had no clue who Brandon was, what this series was. I literally picked up this book from the bookstore and I read it and was immediately hooked and have been a Sanderson fan ever since. I pretty much read all of the books in his Cosmere save for 2 of the secret projects, as well as a couple of novellas. I have a whole Brandon Sanderson playlist. I will link that up in the cards if you want to check it out. But if I hadn't just randomly picked up Mistborn, I would not have fallen into his world, fallen into his writing, fallen into his character development, and had such a great time over the last couple years reading his work. The next author is Anthony Ryan. He is definitely one of my favorite fantasy authors of all time, and the first book I read by him was Bloodsong. And Bloodsong is very similar in narration style, where we have a character who is telling his story. So if you like Patrick Rothfuss or Jay Kristoff's Empire of the Damned, where the author uses that type of narrative style, then you would definitely like Bloodsong. This is a very low magic series with a lot of character development. Ironically, I never finished this series. I read the first 2 books and did not read the third, and I actually fell into his Covenant of Steel series, where I read The Pariah, The Martyr, and The Traitor. I've read the entire series. I absolutely loved it, and I've also read the first 2 books in his Draconis Memoria series. So all in all, I have read 7 Anthony Ryan books. I can definitely say he's an amazing fantasy writer, and if you have not read any of his work, I highly recommend it. Then we have Mark Lawrence with his Broken Empire trilogy, and I actually had his other books. I had his Red Queen's War trilogy, I think that's what it's called first, and I had it on my shelf, and what I didn't know is that it takes place in the same world as this. So some booktuber friends of mine said, no, you have to read this series first before you read Red Queen's War, just because it provides context. And I was hesitant to read this book because I've heard that the main character, Jorg, is horrible. Like, he's brutal, he's violent, he's just horrible, and he's not like a good character to read, you know, from his point of view. But when I delved into this, like, I fell in love with this book and this series. It is so dark. And yes, Jorg is horrible at times, but he is a villain. So you have to go into this knowing that he is only out for himself, that he is going to hurt people. He knows how to be violent, but there are times when what he's doing is for a noble purpose. And he does have a very traumatic background and upbringing as well, which probably plays into his actions. And what I love so much about this series was how dark it was and the necromancy that was included. It was so good. And then the little twists we learned at the end about the actual history of this land. I loved it. Definitely a trope I really enjoy. While this is the only Mark Lawrence series that I have read, I definitely plan to read all of the books that he has published. Next are 3 titles that you've watched but not read. So these are all books that have been adapted into TVs and movies. I've seen them, but I haven't read the source literature. And the first are The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. I have not read the Chronicles of Narnia. I have the entire anthology in one book. And if you guys watched my Classics TBR video, I do plan on getting to the Chronicles of Narnia at some point. Next is The Wizard of Oz. So once again, I have the leather-bound edition of The Wizard of Oz. It's a Barnes & Noble edition. And same thing, I've seen the movie, and I would just really love to read the source material because I hear that it is a lot different than the movie. And I think that there's a lot of symbolism with regards to The Wizard of Oz and why he does what he does. It's a children's classic. I think there's 5 books and another one that I do want to get to. And lastly is The Hunt for the Red October by Tom Clancy, and this one has been on my mind recently, and I was actually talking to my husband because he really enjoys like the Jack Ryan TV show that is on Amazon, and I know that Tom Clancy, you know, has a ton of books published, and he is just an author that is amazing at writing these spy thrillers and these government conspiracy type stories, which isn't something that I normally read, but I am seriously considering maybe starting one of his series and going through his world because I think that there are some plot devices he used that I might be able to incorporate in my own writing, and the only way to become a better writer is to read and read a lot and read different things. So Tom Clancy is an author that I do want to try and is on the forefront of my mind. If you guys have read Tom Clancy, let me know in the comments like a good place to start, because I really have no clue at this moment where to start. Next are my 3 favorite book characters. And I'm going to start off with Jo March from Little Women, and I think the reason that I'm choosing Jo is because I relate to her. You know, she feels out of place. She is not really into nice, fine society, high society, fine things. She's way more kind of simple and humble, which reminds me of myself. And she's also a writer, and she lives in her own fantasy world most of the time, creating stories from her head. And I just relate a lot to Jo March and her story. Next is The Fool from The Realm of the Elderlings by Robin Hobb. And I think out of all the characters, he's probably my favorite just because of how enigmatic he is. And the author just shrouds the Fool in mystery from the beginning of the series, from Assassin's Apprentice. And the fact that he is one of the only people to befriend Fitz, and not only that, but we don't know initially if we can trust him, just really made me interested in this character. But then as the series progresses, we just see this intimate friendship develop between Fitz and the Fool, and just how much they trust each other and how much they love each other and how much they've been through. This is probably one of the strongest friendships I've ever seen in any series. And when we finally get to Hobbs' last series and just the things that the Fool goes through, it totally broke my heart. And lastly, I'm going to choose Bilbo Baggins. I couldn't not choose Bilbo Baggins, and the reason is that he, at the beginning of the story, is questioning whether or not he wants to remain in the comfort of his hobbit hole or go on an adventure. And I see that in myself a lot because I'm an introvert, I'm a big homebody, I like being at home, but there are times when I really, really need to go out and experience the world and travel and things like that, and I really do love it. So there are 2 things within me that are constantly warring at each other: traveling, going and seeing, experiencing new things, and then staying at home, which is comfortable for me. So I feel like Bilbo had that internal conflict going on, which is why it speaks to me, because I do too. Next are 3 of your favorite book covers. The first one is Guards Guards by Terry Pratchett. I love this book. I got this from Dominish Books a couple of years ago as a gift from him. So sweet. But I've never read Terry Pratchett before, still haven't. But he decided or recommended that I start with this book, and I just love the cover. So I don't know if you guys can see it, but there is a dragon that is in gold, and it goes into the back of the book. And I just love how it contrasts with the orange and the flames, and it really made me interested in reading this book. I think it's just a beautiful cover. Then we have The Sunlit Man by Brandon Sanderson. So I really love the color palette here. I love the gold and the yellow on top of the red, and then we have the black and then the black sprayed edges. And this is about a world that has the potential to be burned by the sun. So I feel like the color choices were incredibly fitting. And then we have our main character, who is a character from the Stormlight Archives that has kind of a dark past. So I feel like the dark trench coat that they have him in was incredibly relevant, and I just love the colors and how it ties into the story of this world that has a treacherous sun. And then we have Gothicana by Renix. I do have a full review for this book. I'll link it up in the cards. It is a dark romance, and I love it so much because it has a very dark gothic feel to it, which is present in this book. The setting of this book is this castle on top of a mountain that's shrouded in mystery and murders. And if we zoom in closely, we have the gate and then kind of the castle in the back, as well as the dark rose. And this book just gives me dark gothic vibes, which is one of the things that drew it to me. And I think the cover is very well done. Next is 3 unpopular bookish opinions. So my first one is, I don't think that Fourth Wing is worth the hype. I got it from the library, tried physically reading it, tried audiobooking it, and I DNF'd it. I thought the writing was horrible. And I didn't even get to any of the romance or the smut scenes, but the book is targeted towards a more adult audience, and it read like a bad CW show. And we have this potential love interest that's essentially treating the main character like a piece of crap at the beginning of the book, and I'm sure that'll be an enemies to lovers type trope. But I couldn't finish this book. I couldn't get over the writing, I couldn't get over the cringy dialogue, and I couldn't get over how juvenile it was. And I can't believe this book is so hyped and has such a high rating, because it is definitely not, in my opinion, good well-written literature. My next unpopular opinion is John Grisham. I don't think he's an author for me. I don't think that he is a bad author by any shape of the imagination, and you can definitely tell that he pulls a lot of his court experience, into his books. But I have read 2 books by him, maybe 3. I know I read The Runaway Jury and The Pelican Brief, and I really wanted to love his stories, like I really did, but I just did not like the writing. I found the characters incredibly flat, and the stories, I just thought they were gonna be more interesting than they actually were, and I feel like John Grisham is an author that I would way more enjoy his movie or TV adaptations of his stories than actually reading them. And my last unpopular opinion is Wheel of Time. So I have to give credit to Robert Jordan because he is one of the first fantasy authors that I read when I was a teenager. So I started with Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, then I got into Terry Goodkind, and then I got into Robert Jordan. I might have gotten into Robert Jordan before Terry Goodkind, I honestly don't remember. But I decided to reread Wheel of Time or start rereading it a couple of years ago, and I did not like it. And I'm like, this is not the book from my childhood. I loved the series when I was a teenager, and as an adult, having read so many more fantasy books since then, I don't get the hype. Yes, I think the world is incredibly crafted. I think that the imagination that Jordan used to create the world is phenomenal, but his characters are horrible. The dialogue is horrible. The writing is dry as bones and repetitive, and all of the women are the same and treat the men like crap. I don't understand. And I've really tried to get back into the series again, and I absolutely cannot. I'm not saying that I'm never going to finish it because I never finished the series to begin with, but every time I get back into Robert Jordan, I'm like, he's so repetitive. I have to slog through 1,000 pages of repetitive writing. So, an unpopular opinion, and I have all the Wheel of Time books. I'm on book 7 and not even sure if I ever want to finish them. And lastly, we have 3 reading goals for the year. So the first reading goal would be to read 40 books. That is the Goodreads goal I set for myself, and I think I'm 2 or 3 books behind schedule. And then the next goal would be to read more classics. So I did not read one classic last year, and I'm really disappointed in myself for that, which is why I created a classics TBR and will be holding myself to getting through some of those books whenever I can. And then lastly is to continue with some of the unread fantasy series that I need to finish. I did a whole video, I think last year, of all of the fantasy series that I'm in the middle of, so I'll link that up in the cards for you guys. But for example, I want to finish The Faithful and the Fallen by John Gwynne. I want to finish Foundryside by Robert Jackson Bennett. And I want to finish the Draconis Memoria by Anthony Ryan. However, I do plan on restarting that series from the beginning since it's been so long since I've read the first 2 books. All right, you guys, that is it for the 3 bookish things tag. Let me know in the comments some of your responses to these prompts, and I will see you all in another video soon. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.